Shreyans here. This should be something called Two Silhouettes Talking. I want to start with like minimalism, and in general, it's considered to be a movement, but there's no clear cut definition to it or anything. I mean, I wouldn't also agree with the definition for a movement like that. So, what is in your consideration minimalism?
Mm, so, unlike the sort of most visual depiction of minimalism, I don't think minimalism is only like lack of busy visuals or anything. I think it's like just the when you do the bare minimum to either solve a problem or perform a particular function that it was designed to, or when you do the bare minimum to get by, but still get by without any compromises in the output.
Okay. My sort of like formation of what minimalism is like kind of like yours, because we discussed it before as well, and like influences. But some of the things I would like to add is like, when I was doing research for this, generally when we talk about movements, we just think about the creative community. But like I was going into also the lifestyle side of things, so minimalist living, and there are a bunch of people called the minimalists. I don't know much about them, but like some things that I read in their website were like, you need to live your life in 100 things to be a minimalist. You shouldn't
get excessive.
You shouldn't have a car. You shouldn't have a house. You shouldn't have a job was like one of the things I read. Like I'm not sure whether they're being sarcastic or not, but it sounded a little bit weird. But that is again like the point of discussions we had over lunch one day. So for me, minimalism like is kind of like doing the bare minimum, but it has some sense of relative proportion to it, right? Like positioning, sorry, rather than proportion, relative positioning.
Right.
So bare minimum in compared to what, or in the context of what. So minimalism changes according to the reference point you're coming from. So coming from an ornamental style, anything you can do with like straight lines and rectangles is gonna be considered minimal. But like if you have this as the starting point, you would go much more severe to call something minimal in relation to that. One of the common traits that come out and like the signifiers that come out is minimalism is also birthed out of capitalism. So I mean, it's not always true, but in most cases a minimal version of something is much easier to produce, and like you have lesser things to concentrate on for the user. So that is one like heavily supported way of perceiving it, where like minimalism originated in the time when like industrialization and like commercial capitalistic stuff started operating, where global level productions and sales were going on. So in that case, for me, like when I went through it, it made sense that a movement like this, which can reduce the effort in like for various stakeholders who are gonna make a product, can affect like how much you make and sell the product. So that was a strong correlation, and that made sense to me as one of the strong places, at least in design, where minimalism comes from. According to me, I want to blame Dieter Rams for all of it. So he made something like the holy grail called 10 Principles of Design. I mean, like it. I don't think he also intended it to be like the holy grail principles of design. He has mentioned that like it has to be adapted to the time and like the requirements as needed. But we have just failed to recognize it because 10 Principles of Design is a better marketing term. And that has got to the point where people take it as the Bible for design. So one of the major points, like the most popular points, is good design is as little design as possible.
So one problem that I find with this is like, at least in all the places that I have encountered it, is people only assume this in a visual sense where less is more. So they're like, yeah, get rid of everything that's on the surface, just have a plain surface. But I feel like that's more, like it makes more sense to me in terms of function. Like, for example, if you don't absolutely need, I don't know, like a spoon holder on this cup, like it doesn't make sense to put. You could make it look very minimalist. This could have like 10 other things. It could have a compass, it could have like a thing to hold sugar, it could have a nail clipper attached to it, but and you could make it look very sleek, but functionally it's not minimalist,
Yeah. So you went over it like the visual side of things, right? Like visually.
Yeah, like everywhere where I've seen this used, where less is more, it's like, simplify everything, make it look like a box, make it look like a sphere, or something like that, like very form-driven minimalism. But a lot, like so many times we end up ignoring minimalism in every other facet. Like if you look at the Neil Kamal chair, right? When you said like minimalism is a way to sort of enable mass production and capitalism, that way the Neil Kamal chair would be the most minimal from that point of view. You have this standardized mold that you make a few tweaks, get over the copyright, whatever, and everyone around the world is making these chairs. So in terms of production effort, it's very minimal, but the design of the chair itself, you wouldn't call that minimal. It's got a lot of ridges and stuff, which again, like functionally that might be the bare minimum because you need that structure, but alternatively visually it does not look minimalist. So in the sense that if you want to make a visually minimalist chair where it's just like all sleek surfaces, and somehow you need to figure out how to make that structurally stable and how to like manufacture it to begin with, where no joineries are visible, no parting lines, no seams. That might be visually minimalist, but it becomes interesting again because it's pushing the boundaries of what is possible, and you land up inventing or discovering something new that you wouldn't have.
So generally, like less but better, it gets perceived only on the final product is my thought. Like minimalism gets applied on the product, like the final thing that the user gets to use. Like the other side of minimalism is ignored. It's just the experience part of, for the user, it's been considered. And in some cases, I don't feel even that. It's just visual. So one company that we can agree, at least like, isn't following exactly minimalism, but is taking like lines of directions from this movement is Apple, obviously. So they have made a lot of changes in the industry that has reflected how the industry is right now, and everybody is going after that same lines right now, and they are the reason for a bigger impact for this also. So one of the things is like how the laptops look so clean and like the hinges are not visible, the vents are not visible. But to make it happen, like you're doing so much more in terms of production. The machinery is expensive, machining is expensive, materials are more expensive. So systems wise, you're just adding more complexity. Like maybe from one perspective, just that perspective, it's minimalistic. But if you consider the system around it, both production wise, usability wise, and also like after the product is used, those are places where like the considerations of this principles are just left out. Okay, so before we go deeper into this, are there any good sides to minimalism that you see first? So like just to like not immediately just, we already started shitting on it, but not to just go with that direction, like some good things you notice about minimalism.
I think you can apply minimalism everywhere. In that, like in just that less is more in terms of design, like that itself can, I feel like, just makes anything better. You could have something very luxurious, very like Versace looking, a lot of like dense patterns and stuff like that, but functionally that could also be minimalist, like if your job is to make like a luxury handbag or something, putting more like pattern and stuff into it could also, like if that's the bare minimum you need to do to stand out from the crowd, maybe because you have that production, quality or like facility rather that other companies don't, that you can put all those patterns in, or whatever might be the reason. As long as it's achieving your goal and every aspect of what you've done helps you achieve that goal and nothing is going into waste as wasted effort or wasted material, I'd say it is minimalist.
For me, like the good part of minimalism is like making something readable, making something recognizable. There are other ways of doing it, but like the approach at which minimalism comes from is much more starking, is one thing I would consider. So the clarity and the user experience, which is much more cleaner. So like putting some emphasis on that is one of the things that I liked about minimalism. That is like some of the things that I would like to take forward in like the other things that I do later on as well. So how you can bring clarity and a cleaner, straightforward like user experience to a user, to a person.
Okay, so if you take like Windows gaming laptops, right, which have like every possible port imaginable shoved into it. Looking at it, not a lot of people might call it minimalist, but then it's still more minimal compared to, like think of one laptop that does everything versus maybe some of those higher end XPS laptops or like Apple laptops where you need like 5 dongles.
I mean, you have all type Cs. Technically, all the things that are in the world can work with it. But in order to make that happen, you're carrying around like, I don't know what, 6 dongles in like every Apple user backpack to just make things possible. So you're just adding more hassle to the user's life just for that visual aspect of like a type C, just like cute looking like ports.
And also like with wireless earphones, right? They went so minimalist that you just have the thing that produces sound and nothing else. But like now you got the case to worry about, the charging to worry about. You don't get the same level of sound quality for the same price. If you look at this from the phone manufacturer's perspective, like Apple or Samsung or whatever, they want the users to buy as many products of theirs, right? So the quickest and easiest way for them to get people to buy their earphones is to get rid of the headphone jack.
Now you looking at it from a company's perspective, you understand what is the actual reason for doing it. It's not the design choice. It's more of like how to make the business better choice. So the thing is, a design decision made from a business perspective, I just was mentioning that it shouldn't be considered as the design decision made for the design's sake. So
for sure.
The reason why I was mentioning it is for an outsider or like a person with like a little bit of design interest, like becomes that like, oh, minimalism is this, just removing as much things as possible. This not the consideration of like experience and everything. It's sensible to someone, right? Like the whole idea of minimalism, to me, again coming back, it's like as bare minimum as required. So the required part is the main highlight also here. Like bare minimum is a highlight plus the required part. So whatever I need to make my life simpler, those needs to be there. So if that needs to be there, it needs to be there. I can't just like remove things just because I have the ability to remove it and still make the device work. Like in your consideration, is there too much minimalism?
Too much minimalism is removing the headphone jack. But I feel like everything...
Too much minimalism is a portless iPhone.
Exactly, not recently, but a while ago there was this phone, I forgot which company made it, but it does not have any ports or buttons.
I know what you're talking about. Even the buttons are like pressure sensitive areas. But they have microphone holes or something, I don't know, because I mean you gotta have something. For the speaker they made the screen vibrate to make noise. That was weird.
Yeah, so I feel like everything
Oh.
does tend towards so what I feel like is when we reached a phone, like this phone, for example, where you have like no bezels, just one punch hole cutout, and then your essential ports and buttons, thankfully. I feel like this is a really nice minimalistic phone in the sense that if you look at the whole history of phones, right?
Yeah.
How every manufacturer is trying the wackiest shit on their phone at one point, where it's like, we'll make a circular phone, we'll make a pear-shaped phone, we'll make a square phone, we'll make a phone that flips this way and then this way. Yeah, so I feel like when things start off, be it a design process, be it a product journey, be it anything, there's always chaos and lack of minimalism, which I feel is necessary. You need to you have a topic and then you diverge as much as possible, cover every possibility, and then you convert. So after a point, everything tends towards minimalism, right? Because now, if you look at every phone, they're all more or less the same. This minimalism in the sense that everything's tending towards the same thing. It is beneficial in the sense that I can pick up your phone and know how to use it. If I decide to buy a new phone, I don't have to go through this relearning pattern where, my old phone was like that. And this phone is like that. So, in that sense, where everything is the same, even though it's coming from different sources, in a way that's still minimalism, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that is a huge boon to the consumer.
Yeah. Moreover, right now, I feel like phones, it's not about capability in most cases once you're above the budget phone category. Like the mid-range to flagship, all of them are able to do the 99% of tasks that you throw at them. There's nothing like that the flagship phone does, the mid-range phone can't do in everyday use cases. So now I feel like people are paying for the lifestyle that it supports, the lifestyle it projects. So even in mid-range phones, like the kind of phones like each person buys, like based on like what color, what bag it has, like how cool does it look. And nothing phone, however amazing the phone is, the headline mainly it made because of the gimmicky lights and like the thing that it's a solid phone. Like I have one, like I'm not gonna lie, but it got people excited because of that thing, which is like so cool in like a space which is all just solid matte rectangles.
Yeah, at this point it's just like visually differentiating.
At this point you have maxed out the car. There's nothing to do with it.
So except you just change the paint.
Yeah, you're just changing the vinyl wrapping and like paint like every year. So that's how I see the industry right now in terms of smartphones. Okay, getting back to minimalism. So every art moment is talking to the one that is previous. It's reacting to the movement that has existed before, the trends that existed before. So like Bauhaus came at a point, it's about honesty of like the materials itself, staying true to the materials. So I feel it sort of laid the foundation for minimalism to grow in, where you're trying to be very pure, and like that is the same kind of definition that comes out in the principles of design and minimalism, right? The purity and like the innocence of these materials, the honesty of the designs that you do. So that way I feel like a lot of minimalism can be also rooted to Bauhaus, like the philosophy of these things evolving slowly.
I feel like with the age we're in, where all information is accessible and everything exists at the same time, and unlike previous generations where like if a particular, like in a particular time in history, like everything was similar, right? And like everything existed within that time frame. But in today's world, because we have access to what people looked like back then, what lifestyle they followed, we can choose to implement those things in our current lifestyle as well. We also have the ability to look into the future and predict what will be there and adapt ourselves to that. So I feel like ever since the internet came about and became as democratized as it is right now and as accessible as it is right now, everything just exists at the same time. So you have minimalism, maximalism, every other ism that could possibly exist just coexisting right now. And it's just up to the person or the organization or whatever to adopt whatever they feel suits their thing best. Because if you look at saturated markets, like if you go to Old City, right? Because there are so many people trying to sell everything, a minimalist approach won't work there. You can't just sit with a stall with just one watch, like an Apple showroom, and be like, this is my product and what I have to offer. You've got to like just fill your cart with everything that you have and scream at the top of your lungs. That's necessary for them to survive. Whereas if you go into an area where you can afford more space, you can have, certain luxuries, then, and you don't need to compete as much, then you could just maybe have just one name on top of your showroom. Your showroom's just empty except for the single product that you're selling, and it'll still work. So I feel like all these approaches are on the table, and as we progress, we're just adding more approaches to this inventory. But and anyone is free to pick any of these tools that they want to make their thing work.
So when you mention it, like it makes complete sense that all these exist, and in a lot of ways there are also products that are somewhat more contextual. I feel like a lot of Indian brands, like one of the good ones I would say is like Usha. So they make like different sort of designs for like different, like it's a very contextual Indian based design, I would say. Like it's still modern to this like designs languages that we have now, but it still has some elements that it like dates back to what we are used to, what we are familiar with, what the people, the mass are like accustomed to. So some of their lineups are like fans that we are used to, like when we were kids. And like it's all like those 90s looking like fans and all. They still have some of those. At the same time, they are doing like extremely like cool looking, like aerofoil kind of blades and all these things. So they are catering to all these kind of audiences who are evolved or like who are expecting certain things from certain products. I want to talk about the design community, like especially with students and like people who post out on like design focused like articles or something. Like often, like the thing is, when you search up like product design even in Pinterest and you just like have a scroll through, my biggest complaint like that relates back to minimalism is everything looks like it came from the same studio. Like it doesn't feel like
photographed on a white background, mostly white, little bit of grey with like one orange highlight.
Squircles and like solid metal things, and then like everything having like a geometric form. Like it feels like most of them, like it looks cool, I'm not gonna lie. I would love to make those as well, I'm not gonna lie, but I feel like those products lack something, like the context they're gonna live in. It feels like they live in the internet, they live in the designer's world, as to say. It doesn't feel like they have a context where they're gonna live in. So it's trying to be universal design at the same time, like not like completely blatantly ignoring like a lot of universal things. So yeah, that is my gripe with like how minimalism is still like coming out and like grabbing like some of the designs we practice today, where students and like people who want like aspire to be in this community still look up and like feel this is what design is. It kind of gives off an impact that industrial design and product design is kind of like this. Whereas the things we get to deal with on a regular basis is about how to make something familiar to a context, like how to bring in their design cues. Those sort of things are the parts of design which I feel is very interesting.
I think there are like an infinite ways to approach things in terms of design.
Some things that appeals to you in that case. I mean, obviously, like there's infinite ways. But
So I feel like this is something my faculty Sahil keeps urging us to do, where he's like, figure out the why So, like, you know the 5W and H, right? Like, why, where, what, how,
Yeah.
and one more, probably.
Hmm.
So, if you figure out why you want to do something, you have a good reason to do it, you have a justification to do it, and then the what and how will just follow.
Okay.
You won't have to think about that.
Hmm.
So, for example, removing the headphone jack, right?
Yeah.
Why do you want to do it?
Hmm.
Do you want to do it for convenience? Do you want to do it for whatever? Like, that way it's gonna end up being a good design for someone. In this case, the who was the companies. It ended up being a good design for the company,
Yeah.
not the consumer. So, what is, one what was like, how do we get people to use our earphones, and the how is removing the headphone jack. So, if you figure out the why, I feel like that just results in good design in any field. Even if you take like the bomb that was dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? That was like brilliant design in terms of the engineering of the bomb.
Okay.
The fact that they came about with that technology that did not exist in terms of like pure innovation.
Yeah, just science basis, it's like a marvel.
Yeah. So it was a really well designed product of engineering. But would you call it good design because its intention was to harm people and so many people? So like it's good design from one end, but then horrible design from another angle.
Okay, yeah.
I feel like it's just very tempting to go down the what and the how route, because it's like if you think of designing something, it's like, oh, I'll design a pen or a cup or something, because it's a tangible object. But like, why do we need that pen? Why do we need that cup? And then usually what we do is we design something and then we look into the why to justify it, trying to place it somewhere in the world where it will work.
That, like, especially with a lot of student design, you come up with that. Like, I just have this cool thing I want to make. I have this amazing sketch that I want to render out.
Like, I want to make an RC car with Arduino, but like, why though?
So, yeah, that is actually a good question to keep asking as well. The what, why, how, where, when.
No, just the why. Like, just ask the why. If you get a good answer for it, you're sorted.
That's actually a nice approach, but sometimes I don't know if I can like stop myself and ask why. Sometimes, like for me, like at least while designing, like it's like a lot of it comes intuitively in terms of like the decisions also. It has some logical reasoning, but I can't tell it out immediately. When I'm explaining it to somebody else is when like those reasons come out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if I can try to practice it, but I've been trying to practice that why statement.
Yeah, it's very difficult. Even I struggle with practicing it so much. And it's like I usually find myself doing something, realizing that I don't have any justification for it. Like I'm losing confidence in whatever I'm doing. Then I'm like, oh shit, I should have asked why. I should have asked why. And then I start asking why, and I'm like, okay, this makes no sense. Gotta scrap everything and stuff.
So yeah, like that is one approach, like you mentioned. So one more approach I would like to add is I like minimalism for the clarity it brings, the like simplicity, moreover for the experience, everything. The part where I would like to change the approach a little bit is still having the set of like what is the most effective with the least possible amount of like complexity, but adding a layer of context. So like when you're design, like there are some examples from my juniors. I don't know if they'll be fine with it. But yeah, like one of the guys made like a product. Like I don't want to disclose it completely because I don't have his permission. But yeah, one of the guys made a product for the farmers, and like there, like he could have made it cool looking and everything, but he took a call up and saying like this is for this place, and like that particular place, if something looks cool, like people are gonna steal it. So in that case, he needed to make it much more like looking something like that they made out of themselves, like something DIY,
Yeah.
so that it fits in with the context visually and
Yeah.
also in terms of how it blends in with their lives and their society and communities. So
Yeah.
that context is also present in the design language and the philosophy.
Yeah.
So it commanded not just how it looks, but what it's going to be made from, how it's going to be made, how much cost should the entire product be,
Yeah.
because there's always a possibility of stealing. So that was where like I really appreciated it. It's still effective, it's still minimal in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But the overall quoting to it is also coming, the language and the design philosophy is coming from the context as well. The context is also influencing this. So that bit is like something I would like to like take a approach from all the time, where it's a contextual design. You're trying to be aware of where you're designing for, and like trying to add it to the set of variables you are having when you're designing something. So yeah, that is one of like the approaches I personally like, and I really liked it in that person's project as well. So yeah, that's it. Wrapping it.
Nice.
So just to sum it up, like less but better is actually has its own good merits. A lot of like amazing things to it. Like it brings clarity. Okay, I'll stop. Like 2 minutes. Yeah, brings clarity to products, but the moment where it stops being perceived as like and gets a little too extreme in the perspective it comes from, it turns into something that's evil. So just being conscious of like where you're applying this principle and how extreme you're taking it is a better approach, I feel. Yeah. Yay to minimalism, but not the way it's perceived right now. That's it. Wrapping up. Shreyans.
Aditya.
Boy.